Hi, this is Gail with Beaded Jewelry Diva, and today we are going to do Bead Embroidery 101. So this is going to be just learning how to make a component, and as you'll see later on in the video, you can see how components can be combined to create something pretty neat. But we're going to learn how to make the component today. So I will be talking to you about the beading foundation, which is what you use to actually bead embroider on. I'll talk to you about the backings to use. I'll talk a little bit about thread. I'll talk about picking your components or picking your cabochons. We'll just go ahead and get all into it today, and at the very end I'm going to show you some other ideas for using your bead components, and one that I had never shown anyone else up to this time, so stay tuned for that one. Okay, when I say backing, what I'm talking about is the surface that you're going to be bead embroidering on. Now this is a piece of stiffened felt. I think I got this at like Joann's or Michael's or something like that. And you can certainly use this. Just make sure that it's not on the flimsy side, and like this particular piece I also got, you can see how it's much thinner than this one is. So this is not bad, but I would say in the very beginning you might want to stick with something that's a little less flimsy. So, but this has its places. So these are stiffened felt, and another piece of stiffened felt, and then this is lacy stiff stuff. I would say that if you can, go ahead and start with lacy stiff stuff. I think it's the best backing that you can get for bead embroidery. They come in like I think a 6x9 sheet, and then they have the 8.5x11 sheets or whatever. And I would just go ahead and use this in the very beginning, but if you can't find any or can't get a hold of any or whatever, I would say just go ahead and use stiffened felt, because it works for me. Alright, now as far as the other backing, this is where we talk about the ultra suede. Now granted, you can do bead embroidery directly onto the ultra suede. I usually don't like to, because I think it's a little too flimsy for at least the kind of work I like to do. So I like to reserve this as the backing. So in other words, after you've done your bead embroidery on your stiffened felt or your lacy stiff stuff, you go ahead and you cover the back of it with the ultra suede so you don't see all those thread marks. So ultra suede comes in all kinds of colors and weights and everything. I like to use grays, blacks, tans. Actually, I use just about anything. I even have some that are like leopard and tiger stripe that I like to use on occasion. Just be aware that this comes in several different thicknesses. I usually like to use the very lightweight version. And then there's something that's just above lightweight. It's like your average ultra suede, and it's thicker. I don't see how well you can tell, but this brown ultra light or super light or lightweight or whatever is thinner than this. This makes it easier to get your needle and thread through the thinner. Let's talk about cabochons and the kinds of cabochons and what might be good for bead embroidery. In reality, just about anything goes. But if you're just starting out with bead embroidery, here's what I suggest. This is a little bit what I would think of too big for in the beginning. This is probably 35-40 millimeters, so it's a good size, probably about 40 millimeters. This is a little bit of a better size. This is actually a button, but you could use it as a cabochon if you wanted to. And this is about 16 millimeters or so. This is another one. This is also kind of a flat cabochon, so you can see that it doesn't have a lot of thickness or a lot of doming to it, or any doming actually. But this one is another good size. I wouldn't suggest that you start off with something that doesn't have a dome in the very beginning. It might make it a little bit more difficult for you, but you could certainly do that. Then there are different shapes. This one you can see that it does have a nice dome, but it's square. And in the beginning, squares or edges like that might give you a little bit of an issue, so I would say save this until after you've done a few of your bead embroidered components. Same kind of thing when it comes to the pairs. I think that they're probably best left until after you've done a few of them, just because this particular point can cause problems. Ovals are a little bit easier to deal with, so I would say that if you have a nice oval that you'd like to use that's not horribly big, that would be good. This one I think is like 25 by 15 or something like that. So, by the way, everything's in millimeters that I'm talking about. This one's kind of a little one. I think this one's about a 13 millimeter cabochon, and it's dichroic glass, and this would be nice. It's a little small maybe in the beginning for just getting used to it, but still certainly a viable size. And then we've got something like this. This is a little off round. It's not quite round, not quite oval, but this is about, I'd say 18 millimeters or so, 18, 19 millimeters. So this is actually a fairly good size. Where I would start off myself is I would say pick something that's in the 16 to 18 millimeter size. Like this for a jumble. Okay, what I have here is I have some glue. I am using E6000 glue. I find that it is pretty much the best for when it comes to doing bead embroidery components. If you have another kind of glue, you can use it, but I highly recommend the E6000. Fireline is what I'm using for my thread. I'm using 6-pound Fireline. If you want to, you can use a 4-pound. I wouldn't go to 8-pound. I think that's a little bit too big a diameter, but this is fine. You could also use, I don't know, the 1G or the KO thread. I still like to stay away from Nymo, but you know, you can see my thread video for that, for my reasons on that. But yeah, I'm using Fireline, and use your thread of choice. Then I have all kinds of beads. So I have size 15s and size 11 seed beads. And I will also have a pair of scissors for cutting all manner of things, and then we will need a needle, and I am using a size 11 needle, which I find goes through the backing and the different layers very well. The very first thing that you need to do is you need to take your cabochon and you need to put it onto the backing. So right here I'm using the Lacy Stiff Stuff, and I'm just going to take my E6000 glue, and I'm not real precise with this. I just grab my glue, kind of smear it on the back. Now I don't want a ton of it. I want enough so I'm making sure that it's going to sit down and glue properly. But this is about what I have, and I'm just going to take it. I'm going to put it down onto the Stiff Stuff backing, and then I'm just going to press it down. Now, it takes about, say, 15-20 minutes for this to go ahead and dry, enough so that you can work on it. One thing I forgot to mention is don't get the glue too close to the outer edge of your cabochon, so that when you press it down, you don't want glue seeping out, because that's going to make it very hard to get your needle through any glue. So anyway, there's that. I've got another one that I've already started, and this one is nice and firm. So what I've done is I've gotten my needle and thread. I put a knot at the very end of the thread, so just a little knot. And then I'm going in on the back side of my cap. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go ahead and bring my needle out somewhere right around this area. My needle coming out right next to it. So I'm just going to pull my needle through, and I'm going to tack the thread down a little bit. So I'm just going right next to it. I don't want to go very far out anywhere to do this, but I'm just going to tack down like little tiny ones right next to it. And this, to me, it just double secures. I mean, the knot's pretty much going to hold everything in place, but I like to be just a little on the more cautious side. So I'm pretty good, I think, now. So what I'm going to do is bring up my needle. That's a little bit too far away. About half a bead's width. So my needle is about a half a bead's width away from the cabochon. So bring it up, and now we're going to start putting on the beads. Okay, I have my needle coming up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up 4 size 11 seed beads and let them fall to the end of the thread. So they're down on the bead backing next to the cab. So you can see I'm kind of laying it right next to the cab. Then I'm going to take my needle and thread, and let's see, I'm going to go down like another half bead away from the cab. So this is what it looks like. Then I'm going to take my needle and bring it up. So my goal is to get the needle up so that it's like right next to the cab and in between the first or the second and third bead. So I'm bringing it up through the backing, and then I'm going to put my needle through those last 2 beads, so what I'd call 3 and 4. And I pull it snug. And the reason that I like to go ahead and put on 4 and go back 2 is, for one, because of the way that I'm going to show you how to build a bezel around this. I find that this works pretty well. I've yet to really have something fall apart on me. I picked up another 4 beads, and I'm going to put them down. Again, I'm going to kind of wrap them around the cab. I'm going to take my needle and put it down through, again, about a half bead away from the cab. Then I'm going to come up again between the second and third bead, and this can be a little bit on the tricky side to figure out where your bead or where your needle and thread are coming up through. If you end up getting like between 2 other beads instead of 2 and 3, but say you come up through between 1 and 2 or something like that, you can go ahead and still use that. I just like to make sure that I've got some good thread every other bead, or every 2 beads. So again, I like to go ahead and make sure that I do it every 2 beads. Okay, on this particular piece, I am just about ready to join up these 2 ends. So I've come out of my last set of 4 beads, and I only need 2 beads to finish this section. So I've picked up my 2 beads, and then I'm just going to go through the beads that are already sewed down. So this basically closes the circle. Now what I'm going to do is I want to snug up the circle, I guess is probably a good way to say it as any. I'm going to go through this maybe 2 or 3 times and go all the way around. And this will go ahead and bring your beads closer together. And if you have any like little wavy spots in it, you'll start seeing that it's all going to get a lot smoother, and it's going to look like a really nice circle as opposed to like little bumps and everything. So go around it. After the first pass around, what I like to do is just go ahead and tack my thread down. So let me go through a few more beads and then I'll show you the tacking. I just want to get through those last 2 beads that I added, which were right here. These last 2, okay. So what I'm going to do now is just go down in between the beads and the cabochon, pull it through. Then I'm going to come back up. I don't want to come back up on the outside of the seed beads. Don't do that, because if you start having your threads that come to the outside like here, you're going to end up cutting them when it comes time to do our backing and cutting and backing. So what you want to do is bring them so it comes up like, again, right between. Okay, so you can see that it's all nice and looks all close together and everything. What I've done is I've tacked down and everything, and now I've got my thread coming up through. Again, I took it on the inside of the beads next to the cabochon. Now I'm going to pick 3 other seed beads. These are still size 11s. And I'm going to grab these, pull them down, and then I'm going to place them on top of. So you can see that they're going to be on top of the gold seed beads. And I'm going to do the same thing that I've been doing all along. I'm going to take my needle, kind of estimate, put it all the way down through, and then because I've only got 3 beads to work with this time instead of 4, I usually like to come up with between, usually the first and second. There we go, got it. It's coming up between the first and second of the beads. Go through the next 2. And then this is going to be very similar to what you did on the gold set. You're just going to take another 3, lay them down, put your needle down through, bring it up, and then through. I'm going to show you in a little bit more detail how I'm coming up through the backing and behind the seed beads, but in front of the cabochon, and that is how I am bringing up my needle. All right, I'm down to the last little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and finish off this round just the same as I would have done on the previous round. I just figure out how many beads I have in between the 2. So let me check. Looks like 2 are going to fit fine here instead of 3. And then just go ahead and go round through. And again, what you want to do is you want to go through 2 or 3 times around, and as you do it, you're going to want to go ahead and pull on this to bring the beads even closer into the cabochon. And this helps to keep it locked down onto the backing. Now, this is a great bezel for smaller cabs. I would say anything up to about a, I don't know, maybe 20 by or 30 by 20 cab is about the largest that I would probably use, unless I was going to add a 3rd layer. And I'll show you in a second what I mean by a 3rd layer. Right, I'm pretty much finished, and now what I'm going to go ahead and do is end it, and I'm going to tie things off. I'm just going to go ahead and do a slip knot, or excuse me, a half hitch knot in between some of the beads, and I'll go a little further and tie another half hitch, and do this, I like to do it about 3 times or so, and then afterwards I will go ahead and put it down into the backing. So now I'm on the back, and now what I'm going to do is just go and tie some half hitches, or just try to do it so that I'm securing the thread. Now what I want to do, or what I don't want to do, is I don't want to go outside the lines, so to speak. Now this particular thread is probably going to end up causing me grief later on, this particular one, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. But in the meanwhile, just go ahead and tie off some more knots and everything, and then just you can cut your thread out. I am all tied off and everything. And again, you can see that I have 2 layers here. And you can see how it's starting to enclose the cab. Now, like I said, if I had a really heavy cab, like some of the dichroic cabs can get pretty heavy. If I had a real heavy one, I might want to do a 3rd round. And this is what I mean by a 3rd round. I have 2 layers of the silver, and then I put some size 15 seed beads for a 3rd layer to further enclose it, and this makes sure that this cab is not going anywhere. Even if the glue failed, this cab isn't going to go anywhere. So that's a 3rd layer. Alright, so we've got this. Back to our main point here, is I'm going to go ahead and start cutting back on the backing. Now I just like to go ahead and get rid of some of the extra first. So I've got it looking like this. Then I'm going to just go and staying just ever so slightly away from the beads, I'm going to cut around. Now this is where, when I was saying earlier, I had the one bead that I said might be causing me some grief in this step. Because if I'm not real careful, and I'm probably not going to be, I'm going to cut that thread. And what this means is your seed beads are going to come undone unless you have been tacking them down well all along. So in other words, if you've been real careful about tacking down the beads and the way that you sewed them on to begin with, you might be able to get away with it. I got lucky. So here's that one that I thought was going to cause me problems, and I didn't cut into it. So I've cut off just a little rough piece or a little small piece of my ultra suede backing. And if you look at the backing closely, you'll notice that one side is a little smoother and one side is a little bit rougher. Pick whichever side you like best and to be the one that faces out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my glue. Handy dandy glue. By the way, I like to buy these in these small containers. This one is like maybe 2 or 3 ounces or something, as opposed to the big tubes, because this stuff can harden up fairly quickly if you're not careful, or if you're not using it a ton, and then you just end up wasting half your glue. So again, what I'm going to do is just put it on, smush it down. So now while that other one is gone ahead and is drying, I'm going to go ahead with this particular cab. So I've got my scissors and I'm going to do just what you expect. I'm going to cut around the cab. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to cut just even with the white backing. And if you cut it a little bit longer, I mean, it's no big deal. I mean, this stuff's easy to trim off. If you cut it a little shorter, it can be dealt with. It's a little bit more difficult to get it even. But then again, this is beadwork, so what can I say? You've got handcrafted work here. All right, so you can see that I've got kind of a sandwich here. I've got my ultra suede, I've got my stiff stuff, and then I've got my beads in the cab. So what I'm going to do now is take my trusty needle that I have threaded and have a knot, and I'm going to slip it in between the ultra suede and the backing, and this is just going to hide my knot. So my knot is going to be hidden between these two layers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack this down a little bit more thoroughly, just kind of like what I did previously. And I'm just going to be sliding my needle through. And I'm trying to go underneath the beads. So do this 3 or 4 times just to go ahead and secure your thread again a little bit better. So I have gone ahead and secured my needle and thread. Now I've got my thread coming up from the stiff stuff backing, so I'm on the front, and I'm going to pick up 2 beads, 2 size 11s, and you could use size 15s if you wanted to, or size 8s or whatever. but I like to use 11s mostly when I'm doing my edging. So you've got 2 beads. Then I'm going to take my needle and put it a beads, actually like a half a beads width away, and I'm going to put it through both the stiff stuff and the ultra suede. Now you can see that I'm coming down a little far on the ultra suede, and if you don't like that, you can come up a little bit. You just reposition your needle and bring it up a little bit more. I like to keep it close to the edge, but I do whatever it is that needs to be done. So, okay, let's see how these are setting up. So you can see that these are setting up, they're kind of, in towards each other. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to put it up through the second bead. So up through, and then pull the thread tight. And now you can see that this bead is a little bit happier, it's sitting more upright. Now this one, this is a little bit wacko and everything. Wacko. How about wonky? It's a little wonky now, but it's going to be better later on once we go ahead and join the whole circle. So I've got my thread coming out of this bead. I'm going to pick up one more size 11, and I'm going to put it through about a bead's width away. And by the way, one easy way of telling what a bead's worth away is until you get used to it is just go by, let me put my needle through a little bit first so you can see it, is I just go by where the beads are here. So I can tell what a bead's width away is. So again, it's coming out the back. I'm putting my needle up through this. And there we go. This particular edging is called a simple edging, or as it's more formally noticed or formally called, a brick stitch. So, and I do have a video on earrings that use a brick stitch if you'd like a lot more information about it. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go all the way around with a brick stitch. So I'm just about at the very end, and you can see that I've got still a little gap. This is my last bead that I put on, and this is the very first one I ever put on. So I am going to pick up one more bead. I'm going to put it in right about the center of the 2 beads, roughly, or the center between the 2 beads. Then I'm going to do the same thing that I always do, go up through the back of this one. Pull the thread tight, and now what I need to do to finish this off is to go down through this first bead that I put on. So let's see if I can get you up a little bit closer without all the thread in the way. I'm going to go down through this very first bead that I put on. So you can see that it drew it closer already, but it still looks a little on the wonky side. So I'm just going to put my needle through the stiff stuff and the ultra suede just like I normally would. And then just like I normally would, I would go back up through the back of it. Oh, success. And then pull it tight, and there you go. So the first bead looks just as good as the last, or the last is as good as the first, or however you want to say it. So in order to tie this off, what I'm going to do is go down through the next bead in line. And then I like to go down into, so I'm going to go through again. And then you see where my thread is coming out. I'm going to put a little tiny stitch in, and it's going to come back through the stiff stuff again. And that's just a tiny anchoring stitch, and you really are not going to see it, especially once you've roughed up this material a little bit. I mean, you can see it because I've got extreme magnification on here, but if you were just looking at this normally, you'd never see it. So it's the same thing as always. Just go ahead and anchor the thread. And one way you can anchor the thread here is you want to be careful that when you're doing this, you aren't going through the back. So just check before you finish your stitch. And one of the things that you can also do is you can anchor it in your bezel area. Okay, so you can see I have gotten 2 of my cabs done. You can see that I kept the edging on this one just very plain. And that's mainly because this is a cab that has a lot going on inside it, so I wanted to keep the edging very plain. On the other hand, this one is a little bit more plain to me, so I went ahead and had my little extra for the edging on it. So those are just some ideas. I think I'll be doing an ebook on edges. I think I'll do one, so look for that up in the future. But meanwhile, let's also talk about other different ideas. Here's another little idea. This is just a little blue dichroic. I think it's probably about 12 millimeters. And I just put a little bail on it. So this can be used for a nice little petite pendant. So as you can see, I did a little edging on this one. And I think this is a pretty little component that you could use. Another one that I have is this little one. As you can see, I put a little bit of an edging on it as well. So, but this is, it's not dichroic, but it's a pretty little cab that I got years and years and years and years ago. Yeah. This is one that I showed you earlier. It's this pretty blue and green one. So you can see I have a more ruffled edge to this one. And I went ahead and did that because even though there's a lot of interest going on in here, this is such a big cab that I felt that adding a little extra of the green and the blue around the edges actually did make this turn out okay. Let's see. Here's something else. I have an ebook that I had done on components, and this is an example of one of the components. So although I didn't have anything about the dangle part in the ebook, as you can see, there's all kinds of different kinds of things you can do with these components once you've done them. So another one is, this is another one of my ebooks that I did, and this is entirely made with components. So it's just putting them in various ways. You know, some of them are horizontal, some of them are vertical, but this is a wonderful cuff bracelet. I mean, I love this one. So this is an idea as well. And I'll put links to all of these tutorials that I have. But also something no one has seen yet because I just now finished this. This is going to be the beginning of a neck piece, I think. And these were all components. What I did is I just sat and I felt like beading. So I beaded and beaded and beaded. And every time I got done with one of them, I just kind of put it off to the side, put it in a little baggie. And then when I got a bunch of them together, I thought, let's see. And I just started laying them out in various ways to see which way I liked them. So I like these, and I think that I may end up going ahead and this one, and I think I had a second one. I may see different ways to put these in. Maybe I'll just put one there, or maybe I'll put some up here. I haven't decided how I want to go ahead and finish this neck piece off yet. But you can see components can be connected together to make something very, very amazing. All right. Do you have any questions? I don't know if this helps you in your start with bead embroidery. Do you have any specific questions or anything? If you do, let me know. Just go ahead and put a question down below, and I'll see what I can do to answer you. Meanwhile, this is Gail. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you don't already subscribe to my YouTube channel, hope you do so. Look forward to more beading instructions and tutorials and videos and all sorts of wonderful stuff. In the meanwhile, have yourself a great day. Bye!